this works. Continuing to clean up flute head joints that I made. I am on to the wet sanding stage. And let's see if this actually works this time. Unfortunately, not getting much in the way of what the chat is supposed to look like. Oh wait, chat. What I would like. I don't know. It is possible that I will see chat messages if they show up. Let's find out. Okay. Now to my last little bits of let's see. Still show stuff possible here. Click on them. Meh. Okay. I think if it works the way that I think it's supposed to work. Oh, actually, what happens if I feature them in the stream? Do they show up? Okay. I think I understand what that means now. Okay. Alrighty. Get this angle down a little lower. The whole 3D thing is nice because the process of actually making that ends up design that I don't have to do anything except clean them up. So also trying to figure out how to make the water as quiet as possible. Okay. It looks like a whole two people are watching me. But yeah, so I am wet sanding food. Feel free, say hi and ask me questions. I am medicated in such a way that I'm not feeling super sober. So the answers might be fun. I've also got Invisalign trays in my mouth, which makes me sound less sober than I actually am.
Still recording, right?
And thank you. All of this time, it's actually being broadcast. Whereas before, I was just talking to myself.
Mm.
But I got a whole two people watching
All right.
me do
Watching
it
you
correct.
stand.
Watching me wet sand pieces of plastic.
What's that?
I did not say this was going to be an exciting stream. So for the love of God, people talk to me. I'm hoping that if anybody is typing questions or typing comments, I am seeing them. I don't know if I actually am. There's a spot on the screen that says that I should be, but I don't know. I obviously will not be able to type responses, but I am happy to just sit here and talk for God knows how long it's going to take me. As for the stages, I have 4 flute head joints that I had promised to friends that I had previously made flutes for. I made these ones because I had made flutes for these friends, but after making them and sending them off, I discovered a size and shape of the, can you see in the light, of the embouchure hole that worked much better tone. So I am giving the people I made these first couple a better sounding head joint. Just for the sake of, being nice and seeing if my friends agree that the new Embouchure Hole is in fact as much better as I hope it is. And if, like, if you don't feel like commenting and questioning, maybe just the sound of sanding and water running and me talking to myself is a relaxing enough experience to help you fall asleep. I can see your Bob Ross. Happy little flute joints or head joints. With not so happy sandpaper because I'm wet sanding with paper that is not meant to be used for wet sanding, and therefore it is continually falling apart. Having thoughts of like, oh, if I keep doing this, maybe what I'll do, like, keep a camera on one side, put a mirror like on the other side, pointing down my hands, like do the like live kitchen chef thing. See how that goes. Alright, what I'm gonna get out of this one. I got 4 of these here, but the first 3 I had already gotten sanded to this particular stage. This particular stage being first wiping them down with acetone because I made these out of ABS, and ABS is an acetone soluble plastic, so I can get the first stage of like getting them smooth, especially on the inside of the tube. I can get them smooth by rubbing them down with acetone, and then that cuts a whole lot of sanding out of the picture. Especially because sanding on the inside of the tube is a lot harder than sanding the outside. But now that we've gotten to part of it, we've got to this stage. Actually, I meant to look and see. Since I'm doing this on my phone, I can't see most of the screen. So I'm going to scroll around, make sure that there isn't stuff I'm missing, and I'm seeing that Mike is telling me, friend Mike Batcher, from Indy. At least I think Indy. Unless you live south of Indy. I can't remember. But anyway, Mike is telling me that he can watch people work all day. Yeah, I won't be able to do this once I actually go back to work. Actually, I probably could just like live stream my like screen while I'm working all day. I don't know if that would make anybody else I work with happy. Once I'm actually back in the office. Next stage, we've done the 120. I need to go find the 150 sandpaper. But yeah, Mike, I don't have comments turned off. It's just, I wonder if I click here. Yeah, they don't show up on the screen. So, yeah, if I scroll down here, I can see the comments. So, comments are on. Apparently, I can see them if I scroll to this other part of the screen. Oh, shit. I need to go find me a charger as well. I will keep this running. I am going to go find a charger and 150 grit sandpaper. Okay. Charger. First problem solved. Now, at least I know where the 150 is. Yes. I'd like to say that the testing paint colors is new, but those splotches have been on the wall for like 3 years. Yeah, totally. Still testing paint colors. We are finally about to actually get some work done in the house. We've like been approved for loans and been talking to contractors and stuff. So now we just got to pick out the contractor because we're doing a bunch of stuff. Like, yeah, replacing the cabinets in the kitchen, replacing all the floors in the entire house. We are replacing shower in our bathroom, replacing the tub in the spare bathroom. trying to fix some water problems we have with like leaking into lower level, blah blah blah. By the way, I would totally sit around and watch you tune a piano while I was doing nothing else. Actually, that might even be a nice relaxing thing to watch while I was working, unless tuning piano involves a lot of swearing, which I would not be shocked to find out if tuning a piano involves a lot of swearing. Okay. Let's see. Move all the parts to one side so that I know which ones are sanded. Okay. More head joints. 150 grit sandpaper. Slightly warm water. Towel under the water so it's a little quieter. So what is wrong? Aha. So I imagine piano tuning does involve a lot of swearing. Yeah, fun for 3 minutes. Oh yeah, listening to tuning with fuck, what is that? 88 times 3 for strings? Is that right? I'm not sure. Do all the keys have 3 strings? Yeah, I imagine. Customer curiosity about why they're spending like $300 for you to sit there and twist tuners. Yeah. Um, Probably entertaining. My only experience with that sort of thing is, uh, you know, painting houses, and you always get the like little old man who sits in the front seat of his truck and like watches you paint his house all day. Hey, speaking of tons of strings, are you a gamer at all? Uh, I only ask about gaming because, like I'm not a gamer, but I had recently played, because this game that came out a few years ago, Unravel. And I remember when it came out, and I thought it looked super curious, but it wasn't available for the system that my son had at the time. And so I didn't really think too much of it afterward. And it's a really cute, like, it looked like a super cute and kind of pretty, like, sort of puzzle platformer kind of game. But for Christmas, my son got one of the newer versions of the Xbox. Not the newest, but one of the newer. Um, and I noticed that Unravel was available, and not only available, but on sale. But the cool thing, like, once I started playing it, is most of the music is Swedish folk music. Um, and, like, you know, I immediately noticed um, that the primary instrument in the score of the entire game was Nyckelharpa. Hence the speaking of lots of strings. Um, and the music for the game is absolutely gorgeous. The game itself is absolutely gorgeous. Um, and I realized that, like I said, I'm not really a gamer. I kind of play one once in a while. But those sort of like puzzle for me sort of games like that, or like Trine, those are kind of my games. Yeah, it seems to be what I actually will stick with when I start, like Portal. Um, and yeah, totally impressed by the soundtrack. The game, it just all the stuff in the background that has nothing to do with what you're doing is absolutely gorgeous. Um, and like, it's all like engaging enough that um, I beat the game in 2 days because I was perfectly happy to sit there for hours at a time, listening to pretty Nyckelharpa music and um, solve weird little puzzles. Just figure out how to get point from A to point B. And then when I got to the credits and actually see, oh, these are the traditional Swedish tunes that are actually in the score. The whole score wasn't traditional stuff, but there was at least like 5 or 6 um, traditional tunes that were used. I was a little confused. Like I had to read the credits a couple of times when I went through it, or after I beat it, because I'm like, okay, I know I'm not crazy. I know that was Nyckelharpa. I heard the whole 16 hours or whatever I was playing the game. Um, and then upon going through the credits a couple of times, I realized one of the credits was not Nyckelharpa, but keyed fiddle. I'm like, okay, I'll buy that. But yeah. Okay, Mike, so how much does it bug you tuning pianos, but enjoying instruments like, tuning pianos, which are obviously just tuning, but playing uilleann pipes and enjoying things like Nyckelharpa, which require wait, am I getting just and tempered tuning mixed up? Yeah, pianos are just tuning, but because of the drones, uh, Uilleann pipes and other kinds of pipes tend to be equal tuning. That's right. But yeah, so Uilleann pipes and nickel harpa and things like Hardanger fiddles and stuff tend to be um, just tunings because you've got to deal with making the sympathetic strings ring. I don't know. Does it bring up feelings? Yep, a tempered sense of pitch would make sense as a thing to develop. I'm trying to think. Just recently watching a video um, about uh, how there have been musicians who kind of lived in the world of equal tuning, um, who don't think traditional tunings are a thing. I forget who, some well-known conductor or something was saying that, like, you know, folk musicians are saying they're playing to some kind of traditional tuning, but like if that were true, they would be arriving at like the same tuning, but they're not. Uh, but it seems like every player is playing to like their own tuning, um, and therefore he is skeptical of the idea of traditional tunings. Um, but the person doing the video, musicologist, was talking about all these different things of like, old time fiddle players who play, when you're playing with a lot of open strings, like you have to lean toward just tunings in order for strings to ring properly, and Hardanger fiddles and uh, um, yeah, Hardanger fiddles, nickel harpers, and like all of that stuff like requires just things like just tunings in order to get the sympathetic strings to work. But yeah, I am not shocked that there are two things that don't shock me. There are hundreds of styles of tuning, and classical conductors being skeptical that anything other than equal tuning is, you know, a viable or what's the word? Or not viable, valid thing. Yeah, what? Classical musicians thinking there's only one right way to do a thing? No. That's also a thing that's got me. And thinking about this stuff has made me worry less about trying to figure out like a perfect, like getting a flute in like perfect tune, because I realize is like, you know, um, in trying to make these flutes and make them actually sound right. And when I compare them to electronic tuners and even like, Terry McGee's work on all of the what was it, the real-time RTPA, real-time tuning stuff. I'm like, okay, yeah, no matter what I do, I can't seem to make anything, even some of my like other, nice flutes made by other people. Even like, uh, I just play through scales and play tunes. They, yeah, um, nothing's ever like quite right. And then I realized that like the only way I can tell if I'm playing in tunes is if I'm playing with other people. Because, obviously I am adjusting the whole time. And then, I get to adjust to the mean tuning. Yeah, no, that would make sense. Mean tuning being acceptable if you were programming around a particular key. But yeah, no, that makes sense why why violins work and can kind of work anywhere. And why I hear a lot of violin players or other string players, try to avoid playing with open strings as much as possible, since it's the one thing you don't get to control by ear. Yeah, the further away from the tune, further away from the key, the worse it sounds. Yep, makes sense to me. Yeah, I enjoy learning things about the cult of Pythagoras and stuff like that. Yeah. And also, yeah, like learning about that stuff of like why it makes sense um, that pipers like playing with each other because, yeah, their instruments aren't tuned like everybody else. I was also just thinking, I'm trying to think if this is the year that you came to the channel in St. Louis as well, but maybe it was the year before. I think it was the year before, maybe, because I went and shared a room with Taylor and with Josh. And so, basically spent the whole weekend hanging out with them. And, I remember that Friday night concert at Jesus Christ, we've been going to place for years. Yes, how do you get two pipers to play in tune? You shoot one. That also seems like a feasible solution. But yeah, and thinking about the dimensional a couple of years ago, which is now, what, 3, 4 years ago. I remember being struck at the Friday night concert at the, not the Sheldon, at the, anyway, little theater there in Webster Groves, not Webster Groves, Maplewood, was like one of the first people to come out on stage was Joey Abarta. I had never heard Joey Abarta at this point, but I remember he came out, and the moment he started playing, the thing that struck me was that is the most in tune I have ever heard a piper play. Like, it was noticeable. And later on, talking to Taylor and Josh, and they were like, yeah, all this rain all weekend, all the pipers are super happy. Okay, all 4 have made it to 150 grit. Now I will move on to the fun, so I can stop dealing with mushy, wet paper. We move on to micro mesh, where we get to go from 320 to 3,500, I think. Fortunately, once we get past, the core scripts, this part goes much faster. But hey, quite grateful of, really, let's say quite grateful at having somebody to talk at while I do this. Oh well. Yeah, you go to bed. I have less need of going to bed early because I'm still waiting on a negative COVID test before I can go back into the office. All right. Have fun. Okay. Let's just check some things. Okay. All seems to still be working. Excellent. That's what I need. I need a stylus so I don't have to keep drying my hand in order to do this. Yeah, I'm gonna figure out a better way to set up the phone so that it can see both my head and my hand. So I still have a while to go with this. So if anybody else who happens to be watching feels like chiming in, I am happy to verbally respond to messages, or yeah, verbally respond to chat messages and have a conversation because this is not exciting. Like it started playing around with trying to see if I could figure out how to make a functional flute with a 3D printer when I got one for Christmas, a year ago, which has been a fun process. But I don't remember what I was going to say. Yeah. Fun process, or interesting process of experimenting to get that to work. The downside, like the nice thing about using a 3D printer to make a flute is that I don't have to do a bunch of machining. I don't have to create my own tooling. Like I watch my friends who are flute makers and pipe makers, guys like Josh Bailey and Taylor Stern, Dirk Muse, but whatever the hell his actual last name is, which I don't remember, is that hey, if I want to play with a different angle, I don't have to make a new reamer. I don't have to have a machinist lathe in order to design and create a reamer so that I can then experiment with a slightly different angle on the flute. So maybe experimenting to get a flute to work and to play and to be moderately or acceptably in tune. You know, the experiment progress was just okay, change some things about a drawing, change this angle, and move this hole a little bit here, Let me change this angle of the undercut of this hole. Blah blah blah. Let's see if we can make the embouchure hole a little bit bigger. That's just typing. And since CAD and drafting is what I do for a living, you know, that's the easy thing for me to do, and therefore it doesn't require a whole lot of thought and effort. And the way I always like explaining what I like so much about 3D printing is that I get to, you know, I can draw on a computer just about anything I want, and then I tell the robot to make it for me, and I go to bed. So the process of making flutes is making flutes with a 3D printer is kind of nice because, like, well, okay, it's nice, but it's slow because it takes about 30 hours or so to print one complete flute in one shot. And then, meh, you know, there's like an hour or so of this kind of sanding. Afterward, and then it's done. So it's like, you know, I couldn't do like fast production. You know, I couldn't like be turning out like, you know, 20 flutes in a week or whatever. But most of the time, it's not labor. It's just poking my head into a room, looking at a machine, making sure it hasn't screwed up yet, and just waiting on it. And then the cleanup doesn't take terribly long. You know, so once after I spent like a year designing one that actually worked. The process of like making them after that is like, yeah, I tell the printer to do it. I then wait on it, and then when it's ready, you know, I spend an hour or so cleaning it up, and therefore my labor is really only a little more than like an hour, hour and a half. And the other nice thing is that the 3D printing complexity, like the way it's often said, is like complexity is essentially free. So I get to play around with things that other flute makers don't get to do, like when it comes to the individual tone holes, like your finger holes. On my flutes, every single one of them has a different angle of undercut. Because I can just draw it, and I basically just make the undercut on each hole as wide as I possibly can until it's essentially the angles are like tangential to the sides of the inner diameter of the flute. Whereas if I wanted to do that the conventional, you know, machining method, I would have to have somebody design these little teeny tiny reamers that they use to undercut the holes on the flute. But yeah, so I can make some more like, hey Mary, how long have I been talking to myself? Because today, actually, I'm finally getting around to finishing off those head joints I promised, you know, you and John, etc. That have the wider. Where is the lighting? We'll show it. Because I have to catch it in the light. No, there's the. Where the fuck is the Embouchure Hole? It's over here somewhere. There it is. Yeah, so these are the ones that have the wider. Motherfucker, this is really hard. They have the wider Embouchure Hole. Over here, you can see better. Oh yeah, there you go. Hello. Me. I don't know. Anyway, but yeah, so one of these is going to you. But yeah, so the wider Embouchure Hole. But yeah, that's another nice thing. Yeah. Yeah, slow it down. Still not consistent. Yeah, consistency is going to take a while. The wider Embouchure Hole is probably going to help. But if nothing else, it makes the response in the lower end of the flute is like shockingly different. Actually, for fun, I might, let's see. I'm gonna go grab some flutes and play them for you, real quick. They're just in the next room. Okay. This is a head joint like the one I rally session was okay. So the person who has a pink flute, was it a dude in Italy? Yeah, or was it a dude from Indiana? All right, but anyway, so one of the last, actually, let me swap. Swap the cork out first. That is not long enough. No, not enough. Wide enough. Nope. Flute stand around here somewhere I can poke through. Yeah, yeah. Still not long enough. tried to push one of that in a while. And that needs some wax. And you know, wax in a tiny Altoids can. Which is apparently a little cold and not wanting me to dig my finger into it. Okay. So this, putting it back into the head joint that is like yours. No, I just did a dumb thing. I popped it out of the newer head joint and then put it back into the same one. All right. Old style head joint. Yeah, I know that feeling. I use a handgun case for my small mixer. And actually, my really nice, my old, like 19th century Metzler flute that I picked up a few months ago. That one, at least, is not a gun case, but I've been using a Harbor Freight makes these like rip-off like Pelican cases, and this one is almost the perfect size, so close, but it's because of the length of like the head joint plus the barrel, that doesn't fit in there sideways. So, and it's because it's like a Pelican style case, it's like deep, so it's like layer foam on the bottom, and then I've got the like foot, body, and like lower section of the body on the bottom, and then I have this like piece of foam that goes on top of that, and then I put the head joint going from corner to corner of that, and then these other two triangular pieces of foam that go on top of that. Then I can close it, and it works. But it makes it a giant pain in the ass to just pull the flute in and out of the case. Okay, I also have to pull out the Invisalign trays. In my teeth, which that fucking hurts. Okay. Yeah, okay, that's right. didn't suck. And I didn't think about changing the embouchure hole until I sent one to Blaine, who runs irishflutestore.com. And he was like, this embouchure hole seems kind of small. And it feels like a little tight a tight amount of space to try to like get my lips on it right. And so he measured one of his Patrick Allwell head joints, and he's like, yeah, this is about like a little over like 10 millimeters wide. So that only involved me making this making this embouchure hole 1 whole millimeter wider than it was. And I was kind of shocked at like how much easier it was. It's not so much like it sounds tremendously different, but it's like takes less work to get the bottom end out of it. So, yeah, low D is always hard to nail consistently. Try nailing the F naturals consistently. It's kind of funny because I found this like weird. I don't know how anybody else does it, but when I have to like repeatedly do it, it's like, like I'll roll it, but when I have to like come down and land on the F natural, I'll find this like, this finger will land flat, but I'll bend this knuckle a little bit, so I'm like just kind of hitting the outside of it rather than landing flat. Let's kind of go, it becomes like one position. I don't know. Don't know how, like I said, don't know how anybody else does it. but that's working for now. Alrighty, back to the task. Sanding. Okay, so those three have been wet sanded to 400 grits. Now, back to that process. Yeah, okay. I had a fear that I was about to just sand the my one old style head joint. Um, yeah, I still really like playing the fuck's the name of that? Yellow Tinker. Like the nice thing about playing with keys is like keys make that a little bit easier, but there's parts where like it's actually I have to think about my fingering on the keys before I get there. That part where it's like that run up and down. There's a part where I have to like keep my finger on the F natural key and just leave it there while I like play the rest of the run so I don't like forget to put it back down in time. Yeah, I know. COVID is just fucking killing me on the whole, like, not being able to play other flutes. Drives me nuts. I did just find a guy today in Houston that I offered to do a trade with him. He's been making these, a guy named Critter Bear, I think is his like Facebook profile name, but he's making flutes that he's calling like bear flutes. And he's making them on PVC pipe and he's selling them really cheap. He's selling them at like $20. And his goal is, kind of similar to mine and be like just trying to make like a flute that's accessible to people that don't have much money. And so yeah, I sent him a Facebook message. I'm like, hey, do you want to like do a trade? You know. So in a couple of weeks, he's likely to send me one. And I will see what his are like. 106. There's a little 600 pad. Okay. Moving all my joints back up here, so I know where I left off. And most things I'm like, if you're selling them for $20, like you're either like undercutting the value of your labor severely, because like I come from the world of being like a contractor and hanging out with construction contractors and being a welder and even doing like freelance drafting and design stuff and freelance photography and the one of the better things that helped me kind of wrap my head, better bits of advice to help me wrap my head around what I really should be charging is like, because it's not your hourly wage, after your taxes are taken out, all of that sort of stuff. Like, so you really want to aim for getting about $100 an hour for your labor. And he seems to be like machining his flutes. I don't think he's doing a conical bore though. I think he's still doing a straight cylindrical bore. But and hearing some like sample clips of his playing them, they don't seem to suck. And he also found a weird way of going about found an interesting way of going about coloring them. So I think what he's doing is he's starting with like white PVC and then coloring them somehow in sort of like a streaky, kind of makes it look like wood fashion. Coloring PVC is hard, so I imagine he's got to be doing something with like a dye and a solvent to let it like soak in. Because I've seen people kind of like paint PVC that way, but yeah, you have to use like some sort of solvent, like a pretty strong solvent, like fuck, I forget what it is that gets used in like PVC pipe welding. When the weird, horribly fucking toxic stuff that like if you've ever joined PVC pipe and like that, purple stuff with the little, you pull off the lid on the can, it's got that little like fuzzy ball at the end. But that weird purple PVC glue is, yeah, man, that is some harsh solvent. So I'm like imagining he's doing something like that for coloring them, but they end up being like a nice, like pretty red color. My friend Randall, who lives here in Lafayette, who I have kind of been taking a fair amount of inspiration from, he is not coloring his PVC flutes. He's just like working with gray PVC usually, which is, I think, one of the things that's like why he struggles with selling them. Because people have an expectation of like what their flute is supposed to look like, and electrical conduit gray is not the color people expect their flute to look like. And so he's kind of struggled with that. He's tried some sort of coloring them to make them black. I've suggested, he still hasn't tried it yet that I'm aware, but like looking around on like McMaster Carr's website, which is like a sort of like a Granger industrial supply website. I used to use it all the time when I was like working in metal shops and having to like order parts for gates and fences, and ordering like really weird hinges, or ordering like weldable hinges that could hold like 4,000 pounds and shit like that. But yeah, any kind of like industrial supply stuff you can get like lab equipment and stuff like that there. Not cheap, but it's like the best website. Is the most well organized website for ordering stuff like that I've ever seen. But I was poking around there, and I noticed that there is black there's PVC that comes in black, but it's specifically UV resistant PVC for outdoor applications. It's about, I think, like 3 times the price of regular PVC, but it is 600. We go to 1,000. It is, yeah, it's probably about 3 times the price of a regular PVC pipe, but considering how cheap PVC pipe is, that's not a big jump. Yeah, like the material cost is like nothing compared to the labor costs. So I'd be super curious if he or anybody else has come across that stuff or tried it or anything like that. Like I know there's lots of black ABS plastic tubing available, and that's used for, I guess, typically used for like drain pipes. But I imagine it's not as, yeah, PVC is a higher temperature plastic, yeah, so the ABS is like softer and stuff. So I don't know. But then again, these things are ABS. So I don't know. Be super curious. I know that Randall really likes PVC because of the way he like makes his flutes is he makes them by he makes a conical bore flute, but instead of like turning it on a lathe and machining it to be a conical bore flute, he gets the conical bore flute, or gets the conical bore by heat forming them. So he's done a couple different methods of heating. He's a little bit secretive about this process, about like exactly how he does it. But one of the things he was saying for a while he really liked doing was heating the PVC pipe in hot oil, and hot is in like 300 degrees Fahrenheit. So like if you've ever operated a fryolator in a restaurant, like made French fries or fried chicken in a restaurant, that's the kind of temperature you're talking about. So he would, but anyway, he'd heat them in hot oil and then stretch them over a form of some kind in order to get the shape that he wanted. And he's like, it's awesome, it's consistent, and it's way faster than machining. At one point I remember him saying like, but I'm getting kind of comfortable with the process, and that's not good because it's really dangerous. So yeah, that's always a problem. Yeah, I'm kind of curious as to what the Southern fried flute. Oh god. Yeah, I don't know what the sados are made out of. I don't know how they're made. I don't know if they're machined out of a plastic tube or if they're like injection molded or what. There's a part of me that kind of wants to go talk to experts in like molding and casting, because there are like 3D printable this is my issue. Like there's, filaments for 3D printing that are actually just wax. And so like lost wax casting is a really common method. A lot of jewelers use it, that sort of stuff. You can carve something into wax, um, put it into sand or some sort of fine grain, um, powder and like packed powder kind of thing, or what's the other one? Or like plaster or something like that, and then you just pour hot metal or whatever you're doing. Usually they do this with metal. You just pour hot metal into the mold, and then it melts the wax, and then you set the mold up in a way that the wax drips out the bottom. Has a place to go. But yeah, so you just like make this. You make a positive of the object that you want. Fill it into or put it into whatever molding material you're making, and then you just pour hot metal over it or whatever material you're doing, and it will melt away all the wax, and then leave you with an exact copy of the thing you put into your casting medium. And I'm like really kind of curious about that process. Then the other question is, have you been paying attention to what Casey Burns has been up to? The guy who makes the folk flute. Because he's been doing something really interesting recently, which I'm super curious about. Casey Burns has been posting online that he is done with making his folk flutes out of wood, mostly because he's like, they're so popular, they're consuming all his time. Which one do I have? 1,000. His folk flutes have gotten so popular that they're taking up all his time, and they're so he's not getting to do any work with experimenting with like his high-end flutes, just because he's trying to fill all these orders. So he went and bought himself a resin printer, and he's now 3D printing his folk flutes. The nice thing about resin printing is that like resin printing is super precise. If I were to do these in a resin printer, I would not have to do this process of sanding them to make them actually smooth and get rid of all the layer lines and all that stuff. Resin printing is not a fast process. It's slow, but it's probably faster than, turning a flute on a lathe from scratch. And so I've seen pictures he's posted on Facebook of like his first like tests of like 3D printing his folk flutes, and they look nice. So I'm super curious as to like the day I get to see one of those in person. Although the thing he's also experimenting with, like, highly recommend go looking at Casey Burns' Facebook page, because he's also like made this personal goal of trying to, and I didn't know these existed, somebody 19th century, I forget who it is, I think an English flute maker, started making flutes out of glass, and so they're made of like crystal glass. I'm trying to think. I think Casey Burns is in. I think he's like Pacific Northwest. I think he's in like Oregon or something. Um, but actually, if you ever want to get your hands on like a Casey Burns flute, you can talk to Gray Larson. Like carries a few around with him that he will sell. Um, ooh, and Charles has one because that first workshop I did with Joel, Charles let me borrow his flute, oak flute from Casey Burns, to do that first workshop I did with Sean Gavin, so that I wouldn't have to do it with the piccolo. uh, but yeah, so this guy, 19th century, was making these flutes out of crystal, um, and they're gorgeous. I would so love to see one played, and apparently, according to Casey, ever since then, like however he made them has been a mystery. Um, but Casey thinks he just cracked that mystery because you can't really turn glass on a lathe, and the outside shape of them isn't a shape you could turn on a lathe anyway, because they're not just round. But what did he do? But yes, so what Casey thinks he did is he cast the glass and then drilled the holes for the tone holes, the embouchure holes. Um, but yeah, so there are these glass, these crystal glass flutes with like silver rings and silver keys on them and stuff, and they're gorgeous. There aren't any complete, as far as I know, and they're at least like what he said, like there aren't any complete any of these, complete flutes still extant. So he's been like piecing these together from, pieces of them. And I think he said Benjamin Franklin owned one, uh, which would make them not 19th century. Oh no, that would make them 19th century. Yeah, I tend to forget that the birth of our country was at the tail end of the 18th century. And then most of the founding of our country was actually happened in the early 19th century. But yeah, I think he said Benjamin Franklin owned one. And he did Casey made a test of one where he did a resin print of one out of this transparent blue resin. It's pretty. I don't know. 1,500. Like, man, I'm at, 1,500 Brit. Just a couple more to go to get to 3,500. And then I've recently discovered that it makes, I don't know, about 1790. Okay then. Okay. Yeah. Yep. I certainly won't stop you. Um, mm, mm. Sure, that sounds lovely. Yeah, because just the amount of time spending on these is for 4 of them, so yeah. Um, I think of it like, yeah, it takes like an hour to do one entire flute, but that's like, you know, $25 a piece, or for a section, for a quarter of the flute. And fortunately, since it's just the head joint, the previous, your old little cork and crown thing will still fit, and I don't have to glue any, like I don't have to do any of the cork joint stuff on the head joint. So this whole polishing process is the only thing I have to do. Okay, I can certainly do that. I think it's just my name. I think it's still just like PayPal/Ed if I remember correctly. But I try to make as many things with my name as possible. I see a PayPal notification. I assume that's you. Okay. On to 2500 grit. One more to go after this. So I think I'm past the point of it mattering. Actually, another thing I found that's kind of like helpful is I just discovered this recently. After I'm done, like once they dry, I'll find like little scratches from like the coarser grits that didn't get completely removed in later finer grits. But if I just give it a light spray of lacquer, it helps cover a lot of that up. And the nice thing is, like, lacquer is spray lacquer anyway. It like sticks to anything pretty much, and dries in like 5 seconds. So it's not time consuming finish. I just think it was kind of funny that like when I so I sent one of these flutes to Blaine at the irishflutestore.com. I'm just kind of curious, like I'm just kind of curious on his like opinion in general, and also curious about, if he might be interested in like trying to sell a few. And so I sent him one, and I think he called me before he actually tried to play it, or maybe he just like called me before he like put it together. He was like, oh, it plays. So I'm remembering like I'm like at work and he called me. He's like, all right, so just get your flute and put it together, and I'll knit. I kind of had the response of like, it's kind of funny looking. It's like, oh, but this actually plays. And he seemed quite pleasantly surprised that he liked the way that it played. Yeah, his only real criticism was just like how narrow the Embouchure Hole felt. I'm like, ooh, that felt like nice praise because I don't actually know what I'm doing. I'm just kind of guessing. And being as he primarily sells flutes on consignment, he's gotten to play a lot of flutes. And actually thinking about the like things that sadden me about COVID is, yeah, I can't just go like playing people's flutes when I like see them. I'm like, ooh, can I try that? Because, and I don't know if you've heard me tell this story before, but the like best piece of advice I ever got from a friend of mine when I was early on in playing mandolin. Like I've been playing mandolin for a couple of years, and it was getting ready to like start shopping for like a serious instrument. And so I was talking to my friend Jim, who mandolin player in Connecticut, who a lot of contraband stuff and a lot of it's actually got really into like Scandinavian stuff as well. But he, yeah, the thing he told me was, okay, here's what you do. And yeah, we're in Connecticut. New York is only an hour and a half drive away, or just an easy train ride. And he's like, what you want to do is go down to New York, go to Staten Island, go to a store called the Mandolin Brothers. They will let you play anything you want for as long as you want, like no matter how expensive it is, and you just go there, play everything they have on the walls. And they were at the time, they've since closed a couple of years ago, but he's like they were the I remember they were the at the time like the world's largest retailer of fretted stringed instruments, as far as like what was in stock and on the walls. They had 1,100 something, mandolins, guitars, banjos, just on the wall at any given time. But he's like, yeah, they're really nice big guys. We'll let you play anything you want. So just like go and play everything. And so Tracy and I had just started dating, and I think knew I was going to marry her about the time where she sat for about 3 hours and watched me play every mandolin in the store, which was hundreds. And I got to play, original Lloyd Moore, F-style mandolins. Oh yeah, part of Jim's advice was he's like, yeah, go to Staten Island, go to the Mandolin Brothers, leave your credit card at home because you will fall in love with some $15,000 mandolin that you just can't live without. But just go play everything so you can at least have a sense of like what kind of sounds out there are available. And that was huge. And the nice thing I learned was I'm not terribly impressed by $15,000 mandolins, even $40,000 mandolins that I played that day. I remember very precisely to this day, which since it was before Tracy and I got married, that makes it about 15 years ago. But at the end of the day, I was like, there are two instruments in here that money, no object, one of these two. And one of them was a Gibson A mandolin from 1920, and the other one was a Vega humpback or a Vega cylinderback, they were called, from 1919. And if you ever did like Google image one of those, they're weird ass looking mandolins, but really beautiful. Like they're really warm and like bassy and a really nice open sound. And both of these were like really nicely well cared for and played instruments, so they weren't just had been sitting under somebody's sitting in their grandfather's attic for 80 years. But yeah, it was like and money no object. One of these two would be it. And they were both like about $2,000. So I was happy to learn that like my tastes weren't that expensive. um, uh, um, and the other nice thing I've learned since then, um, yeah, the Fs are popular because bluegrass players like them, um, and bluegrass players fucking hate FA styles. Um, and I am on the exact opposite end of the spectrum because I fucking hate F style mandolins. I just um, the explanation somebody gave me for why I hate them is basically it's like because of that uh, the that curl um, at the top of the body. That's just a solid block of wood, which actually deadens a lot of the sound. Um, but the sound bluegrass players go for is a really high, very bright, trebly uh, sound. Um, that sounds really nice on the hot, like playing way up the neck and all that sort of stuff. Um, and they're really like bright and chiming and that sort of sound. Whereas the sound that I really like are the mandolins that are very like warm and round and very like open sounding, um, which is where the A style mandolins excel. Uh, but the other like giant uh, how to say it thing that like made me super happy when I finally got my hands on one to play one. The mandolin I play now because I actually used to have a Gibson A from 1910-ish that I had bought from a friend years ago. Um, and he, you know, he'd bought it on eBay because he was planning on just taking it apart um, to use the tuners on an old Gibson Mandocello that he was restoring. And then he got his hands on it, and he's like, "This isn't too nice a shape to actually be like taken apart." Um, and so he sold it to me for like what he bought it for, so for just a couple $100. Uh, and that was a really nice instrument to play, and it was that sound. Um, but eventually, uh, actually, you've probably seen me play that mandolin because I had it when I moved to St. Louis. Um, and but I eventually got to like I can't take this thing to gigs, so I wanted more workhorse instrument. Um, so I bought I actually traded in that Gibson A to Music Folk for well, now they're Big Muddy, but they used to be called Mid Missouri. Um, and I really fucking hate the fact they changed their name because Big Muddy is a stupid name. Mid Missouri was like, um, I don't know. Mid Missouri was a much more, I don't know, it felt less stupid. But actually, let me grab that mandolin. Uh, but yeah, this thing, my favorite word to describe like this company's like ethic in design is yeah, Quakerly is the word I will use. Like there's barely anything decorative about it. It's just a little bit of inlay. Um, little bit of banding, but otherwise it's just a flat piece of spruce, and the back is probably walnut, is my guess. Um, but they're very like, you know, they're very like, there's nothing arched, there's nothing carved. Um, the sound hole is clearly just cut with a fucking hole saw. Um, but they're, you got like a little bit of like the snakehead style peg head. Um, but they're like, this is as close to those old Gibson A's and similar, like in sound, for a $500 brand new mandolin, or eh. Yeah. Um, nope, they are made in Missouri. I'm not even going to try to show you the label because I doubt you're going to see it, but it is Big Buddy Mandolin Company, uh, Rockport, Rocheport, Missouri, Rocheport, Rocheport, Missouri. Um, but yeah, um, they're just like, it's just like simple, basic construction. Um, and uh, I have noticed some difference between them, like uh, in like woods chosen. So if like, you know, go into Music Folk, see if they have a couple of them and play all of them. Because I remember like when I bought this one, Music Folk had like three of them on the wall at the time, and I was definitely that one. Um, and then later on, I had Colin put a pickup. Actually, I think at the same time, I think I bought it. I brought my octave mandolin with me, and I was like, okay, I'm going to trade this in, and then for whatever else it costs, put a pickup in this and put a pickup in my octave mandolin. Colin did uh, all of that. Um, but yeah, no, I just generally like this company's like work ethic. Work ethic. I was also telling a friend about him recently, and I was like, that's like it's really basic construction. There's nothing, there's barely anything ornamental. There's barely any finish on them. Like they're not shiny, um, and uh, which is also part of like what I like about them. Because like basically the more the more glossy the finish, that means like the more like layers of lacquer there are on an instrument, and the more layers of lacquer there are on an instrument, the less it is free to vibrate. um, so if I like look at an instrument and it's shiny, like I will bet money that if I touch it, I won't like it. Um, and if I were a luthier myself, I think my method of finishing instruments would be to go to somebody else's shop and just kind of walk through their spray booth and be done while they were like spraying something else. Like uh, whatever lacquer landed on them, just like let that be. Uh, but uh, but yeah, I'm like looking. I'm like, is that a crack? No, that's not a crack. No, that is a crack. There's a very tiny crack, which is a super normal place to get a crack. Um, right, like dead center of the sound hole headed toward the neck. Um, but yeah. Yep, I enjoy it. It was not expensive. It makes me happy. Yeah. Yep, I have played several Websters or not Websters, Webers. Um, and yeah, like Webers have that same problem that I have with a lot of mandolins. Like they're heavy and they feel heavy and solid, and they feel like a solid block of wood, um, which la yeah, lots of mandolins do. And mandolins are hard. It's really that's the thing like I realized is like good mandolins are actually really hard to make because you're trying to like get all this projection and volume out of a teeny tiny wooden box. Like guitars are not that hard because you've got this giant box to work with. Um, but mandolins do not have that option. Um, alrighty, I have a mess to clean up here. So I have like bits of mushed wet sandpaper in the kitchen sink that I need to make sure does not um, end up in the garbage disposal. That would be bad. Um, yeah, string tension is always hard. It's something I've been experimenting with. I haven't done this with my mandolin yet, but I've done this with all my other instruments. Is putting flat wound strings rather than wound round strings on them, which have they're very like they cut off a lot of the treble sound to them, and so like they're flat wound, so they're more like a violin string, um, and but the other nice thing is, in addition to like they're just sort of like bassier, you know, less bright sort of sound, you also because they're smooth, so like you don't get the like there's none of this when you're playing. I also kind of like that too. So at some point I need to pick up flat wound strings for the mandolin. I don't know. But anyway, yeah. Have fun with the dog. I will clean up my mushed sandpaper. Have a good night. I'll let you know when this is on its way. Do, do, do.